Welcome everyone, Detroit Startup Week. My name is Katrina Turnbow. I am your host and moderator with the wonderful Jewel today. And I have the pleasure of having this keynote speech with my fellow Googler, as I am your Google Detroit, Grow with Google Digital Coach Detroit. So thank you so much for joining us. And Jewel, thank you so much for agreeing to be here today.
Of course. I'm excited to be here and to chat with you.
Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and get things started. As Detroit Startup Week participant for years now, and I'm happy to see the evolution of what Detroit Startup Week has brought to the table in terms of speakers, ingenuity, and just creativity that so many Detroiters participate in. Let's start with your story. Oftentimes we assume those that we follow in this startup and this tech community that everyone knows who they are. So Jewel, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, just to introduce yourself and give the world, now that we're all virtual, an opportunity to know who you are?
Sure. Katrina, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but you're freezing a little bit. Is it going in and out on your end?
Yeah, you're frozen for me. So I'll talk and then hopefully the video will catch up.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so hi everyone. Again, my name is Jewel Burks Solomon. I'm super excited to be here with you all. My journey in the tech industry started 10 years ago. I started as an intern at Google in 11 years ago, in 2009, and then started full-time in 2010. And have been on a wild journey ever since. Was at Google for a few years and then decided to leave and relocate to Atlanta 8 years ago. Shortly after, I started my own tech company called Partpic, where we created technology to recognize replacement parts. So I actually spent a good amount of time in Detroit working with customers in the automotive industry. And then ultimately raised some money for that business, raised a little over $2 million, built up a team of about 15 people, had some great customers, had a really good run, and ultimately decided to sell the business in 2016 to Amazon. So spent a few years at Amazon integrating the technology we built into the Amazon mobile app. So if you ever need to find parts, you can search for parts with the camera now, due to the technology that we built, which was great. And then at the end of 2019, left Amazon and decided to come back to Google to lead the Google for Startups team for the US. So I'm currently head of Google for Startups. In addition to that, I am also an investor. So in my own journey, I had an interesting path raising money and decided that I wanted to get on the other side of the table. So did end up starting to angel invest, and then more recently have launched a fund called Collab Capital, where we are investing in Black entrepreneurs who are building profitable businesses. So that's pretty much in a nutshell my journey in technology.
Let's just say your journey probably is equivalent to like 10 people's journeys. All within a span of like 10, 15 years. That is beyond unreal, and in a great way though. And I think it puts everything into perspective in terms of the multiple roles that you've been able to play literally on every side of the table. Inventor, investor, employee, consultant, now starting a fund. That's quite a bit. So let's just talk about that journey, across the board. One of the things as, Grow with Google Digital Coach that I've had the opportunity, of course, is to talk with hundreds and hundreds of businesses, such as my counterparts from around the United States. And oftentimes we find that sometimes the small business owners or community tends to get a little gridlock in making that decision of, hey, do I stay in corporate or do I go ahead and live my best life as an entrepreneur? And I believe there has been some discrepancies and disconnections in terms of the reality of when you step out like that. So can you talk to us a little bit about that transition earlier on in your career to leave Google, because especially when you were there, it was, if you said you worked at Google 10, years ago, any type of tech company, people were looking at you like, oh my God, you work at a tech company, and it being one of the largest. So tell us a little bit, about that experience of what gave you the courage and the decision to walk away from such a great opportunity.
Yeah, honestly, it was that experience where I was 22, 23 years old and made a decision to leave Google the first time. And that was a big decision, and it was a little bit frowned upon, but it was a personal decision. I wanted to be closer to my family. My grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer. My younger brother was sick. And so it was a lot going on in my family, and I needed to be closer to home. So it was really a personal decision and didn't have anything to do with the company, but it was me just wanting to be there for my family. And originally I thought, when I got to so I left Google and started working for a company called McMaster-Carr. And when I got there, I was like, oh, I made a mistake. This is not what I was expecting. This is very different. But it actually was a blessing, because that's how I came up with the idea for my startup, because I saw ways in which technology could serve that parts industry. So.
Joy, keep talking. You know what? Your screen, the video went out, but just keep on my end. I don't know how everyone else is seeing it, but just keep talking, and hopefully it'll come back up.
Okay. Now it's saying start. Can you see me again?
Looks like it's loading. It's loading. Yeah, I can see you. It may be a little bit better. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
Looks good. You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying was just that it was a blessing in disguise that I ended up leaving Google and going to the parts company, because that's where I discovered that there needed to be a new technology in this industry. But at the time, it was very uncomfortable. And then when I ended up staying for a little over a year at that company, and then quitting to start my startup. So again, taking a big risk and not knowing what would be on the other side, but always just betting on myself. That was pretty much the kind of consistent thing throughout my whole career is that I've always known that I believe in me, and I'm willing to take risk as it relates to me. So that's kind of why and how I've been able to navigate between kind of the startup lane and the corporate lane, and go back and forth between the two.
What were some of the things, as people talk about, evaluating risk for themselves and betting on themselves? I'm very similar in my state of being. I'm the type that would jump off the cliff and, build a parachute along the way. But when you say, being able to take a risk and bet on yourself, there are still ways that you were evaluating what made sense, right? So when you talk about that, and I think that's some of the other things of, number one, going against hearing the negative talking, like you said, people actually frowned upon, and, like, hey, why are you doing that? What were some of the things that you knew that you had that, in terms of betting on yourself, you confidently knew, hey, I can position myself to do X, Y, and Z? What were some of those attributes that, either you naturally had or you gained from corporate America that allowed you to have that confidence at 22, 23 years old?
Yeah, so I would say I always bet on myself, but the bets are calculated. So when I quit my job at McMaster, I had already saved up a good amount of money, and kind of knew that the worst thing that could happen is that I run through this money that I've saved up, and maybe I have to go back home and stay with mom. And that's not so bad. I love my mother. We had a conversation about it. If it all falls down, this is like the worst case scenario. But I was young enough where I didn't have a family, of my own to take care of. My bills, my overhead costs were pretty low. And I knew that I could always go back and either go back to school or get another job. So in my case, every time that I kind of made a risky move, the risk wasn't that high. At the end of the day, worst thing that could happen is maybe I'm set back a few years financially. But I was willing to take that risk because I believed enough in the ideas that I was pursuing. And I had enough data to support what I was doing. So before I quit my job, I had a very solid business case around why I believed that this business would eventually, it took some time, but eventually make money and eventually be successful. So it wasn't just kind of jumping out there without knowing at least a little bit, one, on the side of my personal protection, knowing that I have somewhere to go if it doesn't work out. And then on the side of the business itself, having a very solid plan as far as how this is actually going to be a business and how we're going to build, this kind of very valuable technology that eventually, we were able to sell to Amazon. Of course, I didn't know that at the beginning, but I knew enough to feel confident in taking that risk.
Got it. So that's actually a really great transition. So corporate side, you're now becoming a founder. You made personal decisions that said, hey, this is what I need to do for me. And one of the, I think, very significant things that just to highlight, you acknowledge the fact that the season of your life in your 20s and what was associated with that. Everybody goes through different seasons and different stages of life with your, responsibilities that are attached to them. So, of course, being in your 20s, not having as much, of course, now because you are married, and I'm pretty sure there may be some other things that if you had to do it all over again in this phase, it would probably look somewhat different. But now we get into the bigger conversation now that I believe in terms of what Detroit Startup Week brings to the table and what you've been able to experience that often everybody is looking as the holy grail to do the startup and to be acquired, to be bought, but to be bought in a time where it wasn't necessarily as talked about. Like it was, I want to say, do you feel like that time when they acquired you, Amazon acquired you, that it was just getting rolling in terms of the sexiness of the startup community?
I think probably it was more of a conversation and more known, and more people interested in it. There's a lot more conversation now particularly about diversity in tech and making sure that things are equitable in technology. But for me, since I've been in the industry for 7 years prior to selling the business, to me it felt very normal, I guess you could say, and kind of like expected for me because that was my goal. But definitely I think now there's a lot more visibility and people having conversations around it.
So what was it like as a, young African-American woman? Now, of course, you got the pedigree, and I knew that those type of things people were saying as they begin to evaluate you, you've come up with a very unique position with the company that you started. But if you could speak to, female founders, African-American minority represented communities now in terms of going into that, what are some of those things that you learned that even with all your experience, being in tech, 7 years in Google and all of those things, what were some of the things that still, as you were going through this journey, it basically either took your breath away or it made you hunker down and say, okay, I got this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think at some point and at some level, I had to come to grips with the fact that it was harder for me. And it was going to continue to be harder for me because of my identity as a young Black woman. That is something that it wasn't top of mind when I entered into building my company, but it quickly became a big point of contention for me that I was like, oh, okay, I'm being treated differently, or I'm not getting the same respect and consideration. And that's something that was true. It was a fact. But it couldn't stop me from getting to the ultimate point that I was trying to get to.
Uh-oh. Okay, Maria, I actually see your question just popped out. We're going to give it a second. Hopefully her feed or the buffering comes up.
Jewel, can you hear us?
Can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Let me know if I go out again.
Okay. So you can still hear, we couldn't hear you, but you can hear me talking?
Yeah, I can hear everything. I can't see you, Katrina, but I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm going to just keep going and y'all tell me if I need to stop.
Sounds good.
Okay. So yeah, I was just saying that, it became clear to me pretty early on that I was going to have some battles around things that I couldn't control. But the way that I was able to overcome that was to not give it too much energy and just stay focused on, my goal was to build a great business. I had a goal around being acquired because I thought that was the best path for the company. And so that was what kept me going every day, was building something that I could be proud of. I had a personal story tied to my business where I wanted to build it for my grandfather because he needed to find a part for his tractor, and I wanted to build technology to help him be able to do that. And so that was what was top of mind for me at all times. And the other kind of externalities that I couldn't control around how people felt about me being the leader of the company and, me not being what they expected as far as a CEO of a tech company focused in the industrial parts space. I couldn't let that dictate how I was going to move forward.
Did you have, or who were your champions in that space? Not necessarily by name, but who did you find? Because, while you're fighting battles, you tend to either acquire allies or you have those one or two people that see the light and believe in you no matter what color position that they were in. What did you find in that community at the time that, in addition to all of what you were putting in, who was behind the scenes that still supported you and, helped maybe even crack a door when others were totally resistant or, like you said, viewed you in a way that wasn't fair?
Yeah. There have been so many people along my journey that have opened doors when they didn't have looked out. One person I will call out by name, because I think a lot of people in the Detroit ecosystem probably know him, is Chris Gentile. He was an early champion mentor for me when I first got to Google, and has continued over the past 10 years to be someone that I can always count on for sound advice and really just to make a way. So got to give a shout out to Chris for being consistent and for helping me kind of create a path. Like, a lot of people don't know, but part of the time that I was building Partpic, I was also at Google as an entrepreneur in residence, and Chris made that possible for me. So in a world where I was not able to get the investments that I probably should have been able to get because of how great, what we built was, I had to find the hack, which was having a job at Google and using that to kind of fuel the dream. And Chris made that possible for me. So I have to give a shout out there.
Oh, I will, and I'll second that shout out because if you all didn't know, which you probably wouldn't, Jewel was the precursor of her entrepreneur in residence, and the reason that the Google Digital Coaches roles around the United States exist right now are truly because of his commitment and dedication and his vision of making sure that diversity and inclusion, collectively is a part of that program within Google. So shout out to Chris. So that's so dope, again, just being able to highlight and giving people comfort, because I think in this time right now, as we go and come through so much adversity and things are being talked about and seen that we in the African American community have known our entire lives. But the bigger part now is, now is a transition and getting into the position of power and having tough conversations or just real conversations about everybody not having to maybe walk the same path that you had to because you really knocked down those doors. So let's advance to where we are today, which is you wearing two different hats, which is head of, let me get it right, Google for Startups, global head of US, and also your position and co-founder of Collab Capital. So as usual, out here juggling more than one thing. So I think that is so dope for on so many different reasons and so many different levels. So let's talk about Collab Capital and what that is, and how you're actually supporting the community from where you actually came from as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so Collab Capital is a new investment fund. It's what we call an alternative capital fund because we're not a traditional VC fund. We think that there is a need to fill the gap between businesses that can go and get a traditional bank loan and businesses, the 1% of businesses that can go and get venture capital. There's about 83% of businesses that, because of how they're structured or because of their goals, will never be able to access either path. And so we're serving those businesses with a particular lens on investing in Black founded businesses. So we're still looking for innovative, technology-enabled companies, but we really are focused on getting these companies to a point where they can be profitable and sustainable, and really a focus on ownership and optionality for the founders of those businesses. So we are deep in the middle of a fundraise for Collab, and we actually just announced our first investment, which was in a business called Hairbrella, which is an innovative rain hat company out of Atlanta.
Yes, and she is out here killing it, being mentioned by Beyonce and such.
Yes.
Well, you know what? So the intention with Collab Capital, which makes you guys a little bit different, as in, just so I'm clear, you guys don't necessarily have to have a company that you've invested in. They don't have to turn into maybe a public company. Again, can you just explain that, just because everybody sometimes thinks they're qualified to be a startup, and there are different qualifications or expectations that I think people just don't understand.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit more context there, when people talk about venture capital, the expectations on a venture deal is that the company grow to be somewhere between at least $1 billion, and now the number is more like 10 billion. That's kind of the key number that venture capital is built on. What we think is that that's great, but there's only a small segment of businesses that can ever be 10 billion plus businesses. And there is a much wider set of businesses that can potentially be between, call it 10 million and 100 million, which if you build a $10 million business, that's a great business, or a $100 million business, that's a great business. And we think those businesses deserve early capital as well. So we built a model that optimizes for getting businesses to that kind of 10 to $100 million range, because we think that that's necessary for, particularly for the Black community, to have folks that have operated and worked in businesses at that level. And at some point, we want to go after the unicorns as well, but we think it's important to build sort of this foundational layer of operators who have been able to grow a business to that point. And also, again, we want people to be able to maintain ownership in their companies. And so I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, and being able to watch entrepreneurship early was really pivotal in my journey. And I want to make sure that in our community, we have more folks that have been able to grow and scale businesses, but also pass them down in their families as well. So that's kind of the core thesis of what we're doing at Collab.
Okay, so you have the Collab side. Now let's talk about Google for Startup side, because as you guys are positioning and supporting companies financially who probably are already at a certain scale or have a certain, history, viability within their organization, Google for Startups, which you are the U.S. head for, have some other initiatives that actually can support you, maybe even getting to that point of, where someone like you guys, Collab Capital, could potentially invest in. So tell us a little bit about specifically what is the division of Google for Startups, and then the initiatives that you guys have going right now that their availability for small businesses to participate in.
Yeah. So Google for Startups is Google's efforts to level the playing field for underrepresented startup founders and communities. So we are doing a lot to make sure that these founders have access to the best of Google's products, people, and resources. Just last week, we announced some really great things. So we have currently for everyone 2 accelerators that are open for applications. And can you all hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, two accelerators. One is specifically for Black founders, and the other one is specifically for women founders. And so both of them are 3-month programs where we are particularly focused on technical enablement. So getting companies that have a focus on AI or machine learning, getting them access to Google experts to help them with growing those businesses. So those are a couple programs we have. And then, as always, Google for Startups is focused on partnering with organizations who are supportive of that mission of leveling the playing field as well. So, for example, in Atlanta, I'm currently running a program called the Atlanta Founders Academy, where we have 45 startups in the Atlanta area. Of course, we're now all digital, but we're doing 8 months of programming to make sure that those businesses are successful. So lots of great things that we are doing, but all of it is connected to bringing the best of Google to startup communities with a special focus on startups that have been historically underserved and underrepresented.
So just as I'm looking at the application here, and we'll put the link in. If right now, you guys, if you are multitasking, of course, watching this, if you just literally Google Google for Startups Accelerator and semicolon Black founders. But if you type in Google for Startups Accelerator, that actually will immediately take you to that page, and you can actually look at the multiple programs there and click through the initiatives that they have. But just to give a little bit of clarity again, because one of the things that, of course, every industry, that you participate in, you need to understand the language and the nuances and the cadence of that. Here it says high potential seed to Series A tech startups based in the US. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is? Because again, people jump in, it's like, yes, I fit. And
yeah, so
might need to position themselves.
Yep, exactly. So we want to have a full range of offerings for startups at various points in their journey. So for example, the program I was mentioning that I'm currently running in Atlanta is for startups that are a bit early in the journey. So maybe folks that haven't yet raised money or kind of just getting off the ground. These accelerators are actually for startups that are already kind of out there in market, already have their teams built up, and are really looking for that next step as far as the technical enablement. So when we say seed to Series A, we're really just saying startups that are already sort of in market, already maybe have raised a little bit of money, and are ready to supercharge their technical side of the house.
Got it. Okay. See, that makes a big difference. So, and for our community of small business owners and entrepreneurs who are interested, right? And, I imagine with the climate and the awareness now that has been, brought to everyone's attention, the world's attention, these opportunities aren't going away, anytime soon. And especially since you're in the position to make sure that they don't, Jewel.
That's right. That's right. These are going to be long-standing. This is not just a one-time thing. Actually, the accelerators have been running in other countries for many, many years, but this year is the first time that they're running in the US. So just for context and background, me coming into this role as the head of US is the first time this role has existed. The Google for Startups team has historically been more of a player in what we think of as emerging markets outside the US. And this year, honestly, is the first time that we have done these accelerators in the US. So we will continue to do them, but it's really great to be able to bring these programs to the great startups that are here in the States.
That's awesome. So for those who are maybe thinking, or interested and still in that, pulling it together, developing a team. Can you give some words of wisdom in terms of positioning yourself, things to consider, as you go along your business journey to find out if you can be a fit in this space? And even if you're not, what does that look like in terms of just making sure that your business is viable and other opportunities exist?
Yeah, so I'll give a plug for our website, which is startup.google.com. There are a ton of great resources for those that are kind of just getting started and trying to figure out if what they're working on is good, and if they should keep going with it. So lots and lots of resources there. And then
Jewel, we lost you.
Dropped you audio-wise, Jewel. You still hear us? For those of you looking for those links, we put them over in the chat, trying to keep up with you ladies as you drop all these nuggets of great info. So we're dropping links in the chat for those of you following along.
Okay.
Can we hear you, Jewel?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where I broke up, but I was just the last thing I was doing was giving a plug to Katrina for the Grow with Google workshops that she leads. I think that's also a great place for people to kind of get started and kickstart their businesses as well.
Okay. Well, we actually have a little bit of time, and I know with 105 participants in the group, I'm pretty sure we have a few questions, and I actually want to give the opportunity for people to have a discussion and because if you don't know me, talking is not one of my weak points in life. So I am going to, let's switch over. Let's start having a conversation with the community, and let's talk about, what's on your mind, what questions you have. So let's see, Lionel B, you're the first person that popped up in my visibility. What are some of the things that must be true for Collab Capital to invest in a startup? I think Jewel gave a little bit of that, but Jewel, if you want to drop any more gems or, any more suggestions, pointers in reference to working with Collab Capital.
Yeah, so at Collab, like I mentioned, we're focused on helping businesses get to profitability so that we can work our model, which is actually a profit share model. So early kind of proof points for us are you already in market? Do you have kind of early revenue and signs of a trajectory towards profitability? So don't have to be profitable yet, but need to be able to show that you have a business model that makes sense. So that's kind of check number one for us. We're also really focused on the founder. So we're still investing pretty early, and we need to be able to have belief that the founder can execute and actually has a level of expertise in the area that they are building in. Or if it's not their expertise, for example, our first investment, the founder, Tracy Pickett, she didn't go to school for making rain hats, but she's an IP attorney, and so has a level of expertise around sort of putting the patents to protect the design that she created. So there are different ways to get at that. But those are a few of the things that we're really focused in. And of course, our thesis is all around investing in Black founders, so that's important as well.
Okay, so as a matter of fact, that's a great point in terms of Tracy, being an attorney, IP attorney. What are some of your suggestions when it comes to putting together teams? If I have learned anything during my own entrepreneurship journey, it is how hard putting together a team can actually be. And definitely as companies go in, of course, a startup, and you have heard of problems where, founders are falling out with people and building those teams.
Yeah, I've experienced it. I said, I've experienced it too.
Oh, well, let's speak from experience. Jewel,
yeah.
Talk to us about what that's like, because I truly believe in my own journey in the space that I am now. Leadership and building teams is is the only way that you can truly scale. And I believe the African American community specifically, because we have had to do so much on our own for so long. Oftentimes that is not a instinctive skill or something that we easily, transition into for a multitude of reasons, just like any other skill set. But talk to us about that, building that team that's a solid team that you as an investor can look to and say, okay, they got it right. Okay, we can take that gamble and okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, team building and being able to put the right team around an idea is top as far as skills and things that you need to be able to do to be successful in business. I mentioned I've experienced.
Uh-oh, you broke up.
Hey, Jewel, right when you started on my experience, or I've experienced, when you come back on, that's where we heard as you started the story.
What about now? Am I back?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. Sorry about this. I don't know what's going on here. Yes, I was just saying, a couple key points I would say on team building. Number one, if you can, I highly recommend building with someone you've built with before. It's really hard to start a new business and start a new relationship with whoever you're building the business with. So as much as you can, try to have already the proof points that you can work with the folks that you're trying to build with, because you've done it before. And so that's thing number one, I would say. Number two is when it doesn't work out, or when it's showing signs that it's not going to work out, be okay with cutting ties. For me, I think what saved me is that I recognized pretty early, like, okay, this isn't a good fit. There's no bad blood, but it just is not working out. So let's move out of this situation before it becomes an issue or before it becomes bad. And the thing that helps you with that is having good legal paperwork from the beginning, good contracts. As any partnership agreements, operating agreements, anything that you get into, you're going to want to make sure that everything is on paper and it's clear what happens in the case that things go south or go sour, because it can happen. So just a couple things, just like if you can work with people that you've worked with before and you've shown success with before, and then for all partnerships, make sure you have some agreements in place for the worst case scenarios. And then if you see things not working out, don't be afraid to end the partnership, in the team, split if you have to, because it's much easier to unwind things at the beginning than it is at the end.
Oh, that's an understatement, I'm pretty sure. Well, let's actually talk about that from, let's call it the entrepreneur side. Again, everybody is not supposed to be an entrepreneur, okay? That's one of my conversations that I like to highlight. And that's not a negative thing. I understand all the hype and the excitement, but the entrepreneur grind is something special, and you have to be a special person in order to do that. What do you say for those, who love this community, but don't necessarily want to take on and be that creator? I believe also our startup communities, we need really, really great talent. So talk to us about, for those who want to participate, but maybe not as an entrepreneur, what are some of the roles and positions, that are needed in this community, especially, from the position that you sit as a female African-American woman, that oftentimes you see that some of these companies are struggling with, that could be an asset?
Yeah, so one is just good to recognize that within yourself. If you're not an entrepreneur, it's totally fine. We need folks that, everybody can't build everything. We need people that can help. And that can be part of teams. So it's important to have that conversation with yourself and know one way or the other kind of where you stand. And it's also important to know that in different seasons of your life, you can be an entrepreneur, and then in different seasons you cannot be. For me, I couldn't be a builder right now, I'm building something, but can't be building a new company right now because I think my place in the ecosystem has evolved, and I need to be in the position where I'm actually helping the builders right now. So it's important to kind of have that conversation with yourself. And then the other piece is understand the power that you have from the seat that you're in. So, if some folks that are listening, if you're in a corporate position where you can be a buyer, be a user, be a customer for someone in the startup world, then that's the position that you're in, and that's a very important and needed seat. Think about what doors can you open for folks if you're not in the position to be a builder right now. Startups only thrive if they have customers. So if you can be a customer or a user to someone, then that's a very, very important seat to sit in. If you can't do that, perhaps you can connect someone to a customer or a user, or just kind of help promote whatever they're doing. So I think it's important to just kind of everyone do an assessment of what their place is in this ecosystem, and then execute to the best of your ability on whatever that position is.
Awesome tips. Well, I'm looking at this chat right now, you guys. If you have any questions, please drop them as we get ready to wind down, because Jewel has to jump over to her next chat in the founder salon that's coming up right after this. So as we take on more questions and we review them, Jewel, let's talk about one other thing when it comes to those non-tangible, things that people don't talk about, which is the managing the emotional and the emotional weight of being a founder and balancing it with family. And oftentimes it's just I'm pretty sure when you were just before you're getting ready to sell your company at Amazon, it was so many instances where it was only you. And sometimes that's a heavy burden to bear when it comes to those interpersonal skills or things that maybe people never talk about, that you should consider. Just what would be your advice in that from, your point of view of being in corporate and, being a founder, investor and everything?
Yeah, that's a huge question. We could probably do a whole nother session on it, but I think it's important. It's really critical because the entrepreneurship journey is extremely lonely. It's extremely challenging. I've talked about this at length in different settings that for me, it turned out to be an actually depressing journey for me. I've described how, I sold my company and I couldn't get out of the bed the next day because it was such a kind of heart-wrenching experience. So yes, the emotional piece of it is very important. The thing that I really think is important for entrepreneurs is to early find the support system, find the people who you can talk to in the late night hour when it gets really, really difficult and really dark. And if you don't have anyone, then I would definitely consider and recommend therapy. For me, that was definitely a saving grace. Being able to talk through all of the stuff, not just the stuff with the business, but everything personally as well. So I highly, highly recommend if you can, and if you're an entrepreneur, even if you feel like you're good, things are sailing along, everything is good to go, I highly recommend therapy because you never know when things are going to turn up and turn around, and also to just manage the relationships that are affected by your entrepreneurial journey. You might think that things are good with you, but the people that you're in relationship with maybe don't understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, and maybe you all need to get ahead of problems that might come in advance. So definitely say, as much as you can, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, give yourself breaks, especially in this kind of quarantine environment that we're in. Get outside, breathe, walk. Don't just stay at your computer all day. And I'm telling that to you, but I'm telling it to me too, because it's very easy to get locked in. So yes, very, very, very critical to take care of your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, all of that as you're on the entrepreneurial journey. Okay.
Well, let me just ask you this. What are you reading right now, Jewel?
Ooh, I am reading a book it's so many things happening right now, but I'm reading a book about Black capitalism and kind of the awakening that must happen around those two words together. So that's what's on my mind and what I'm reading.
Okay, all right. Well, I think
Hey, ladies.
It seems that our time has come upon us.
No, we can take a couple more questions. Just before we get into kind of the final stages, and then before we get off, I'll make a final thing. Just wanted to make some announcements while everyone's here, all our attendees. The Female Founders Salon session will start promptly at noon. Jewel and 4 other founders will be over there for the salon session to discuss more about their founding, what their experience has been like. And so that salon session will be starting at noon. And then later this afternoon, the organizers want us to remind everyone that Julie Roslini from Ford is making a big announcement at Detroit Startup Week live at 2 p.m. Julie's going to be on at 2 p.m. from Ford for a big announcement. And Marcus Lemonis is going to be on at 4 p.m. So if you haven't registered for those are new ones that the organizers added. So they want us to help make everyone aware that that's happening. And similarly as well, the open networking portal will be open at noon, and it'll be open all day. So that open networking portal you can access at noon, and that'll be open for the rest of the day. So if you'd like to connect with speakers or other participants there, you're welcome to do so.
And also, I round out at 5 p.m.
Yes.
Startup Week, Google My Business and learning those tools. So I expect all 105 participants, I expect to see you.
If you want to do anything online, please add and include the hashtag DETSW2020. Are there a couple more, Katrina, we can jump into before we end?
Oh, one last question we just had come from Philip. What makes a successful marketing strategy? And let's just make that a little bit more specific, marketing strategy as it relates to positioning yourself as a founder.
Sure. I think every successful marketing strategy starts with understanding the customer that you're trying to market to. So kind of a deep analysis of your most perfect customer, your profile prototype of a customer, and then working backwards from there. So thinking through, where does this person exist? And if you're a startup founder and you're trying to, let's just say, raise money, thinking about where does your perfect investor exist? Kind of what are their interests? It's interest as far as types of businesses that they're investing in, and then kind of working back from there. So that's any marketing plan. The short answer is it starts with the customer and really understanding and having a deep analysis of what drives the customer and how your product fits into that.
Okay, Grant, I got one more. This is a good one because it's from Eddie. Eddie's in the community. All right, Eddie, you get your question answered, brother. It's kind of long, but with all the money starting to become earmarked for minority founders due to the current set of events, should minority founders start to change their mindset a bit with regard to fundraising early on?
I don't know what their mindset was before, but I think it shouldn't be. What's happening right now shouldn't be a distraction from whatever you were planning to do. So what I mean by that is, if you were planning to build a business without investors because you want to maintain ownership of your business, then you should keep doing that. If you were planning on pursuing investors, then please take note of the investors that are now interested in having conversations with more Black founders or diverse founders. So I would just pay attention and don't let the current moment kind of knock you off the ball of whatever it was that you were pursuing. And also, please remember that investment is not charity. It is giving away something for something. So make sure that, you keep that in mind and think about the end state that you want to end up with. I sold my business when I sold my business because I didn't want to give up majority control of my company. That, there are many reasons why, but that was one reason why I didn't go and raise more money instead. So just keep that in mind, that investment is not charity. It is an exchange, and make sure that you're using that as you make decisions.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our wonderful conversation. Jewel, I want to say thank you so much. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to interview you and have this keynote conversation with you. In addition to that, how dope is it that you and I get to come together underneath the program that you basically were the prototype for, to a certain degree, and the evolution of what Grow with Google Digital Coaches have become. Again, another shout out to Chris Gentile and us having this moment together. So that's pretty special to me, and hopefully the organization itself, we can all smile together about this one. So thank you to everyone who tapped in, chimed in, asked questions. As they said, it'll be recorded. I'm going to go back and watch it. And feel free to also follow myself, Katrina Turnbow, on all social media channels where you can stay connected to the opportunities that Google continues to provide this afternoon at 5, 3, and Monday at 2.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Really appreciate you sharing your story. And so all of us are now going to jump over to the Female Founders session, the salon, where we're going to talk actually more about these stories from even more ladies.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
See you guys over there too. Bye,
See
Jewel.
everyone over at the salon.
Bye.